Good morning, everybody. Today we are going to do a compression test on this engine. This is the one out of the 68 bug. We've got it running. We fixed that fuel leak, but I still don't know, I don't know anything about this engine. We bought the car without it running, so I just want to make sure it has some decent bones and guts to it. So we need to do a compression test for that. However, before we do a compression test, we need to adjust the valves to make sure our compression test readings are accurate. So we need to do that. However, before we do that, we're gonna go ahead and get it off this floor engine stand over onto this other engine stand I got off Craigslist a couple months ago. And so that is step one. So let's work on getting that set up. Good, different day, next day morning. After yesterday's not so successful trip trying to get the engine up on the engine stand, we're gonna go ahead and do it down here on its little trolley. So we're gonna go ahead and get the valves adjusted and then get it warmed up and then do a compression check and see how the engine is looking. And if by chance you're interested in watching that slow motion train wreck of a process getting it on the engine stand, I've put it at the end of the video for your enjoyment. Let's go over what a compression test is, what it's checking in your engine. So we have this blue piston going up and down with connecting rods connecting it to your crankshaft. So the goal is to turn your crankshaft to make your wheels eventually turn through your transmission. But anyway, the blue going up and down represents the piston moving inside your cylinder. So there, just think of it like a cylinder and then this piston moving up and down inside. So as the piston moves up and down, it's actually getting pushed up against the head of the engine. So a head would look something like this. So we'll just say simplified as this. So just a block, right? So think of putting your hand over the top of this and it's going to build up some pressure. So as it's going up and down in there, let's do wireframe here with this on. So you can see it's going up and down. So this is the piston and going up and down and compressing against the top here. Now you'll see there's an inlet and an outlet. So what happens in the engine is you get gas coming in here. Compression happens. There's a spark that ignites it on fire and that pushes the piston back down, and then this side opens up and your exhaust vents out this side. So compression is how much compressed air is happening in here when explosion happens to drive your piston back down. Now a couple other variables that come into play. I talk about adjusting the valves. So what are the valves here? So the valves control the incoming gas and air mixture and also the exhaust coming out. So if we turn on a valve here and a valve here, so this is effectively, again, very simplified, but what's going on here is we have this as a valve and it's sealing. Let's do something here. Let's take this and move it up for a second. Move it up here. So let's take a look underneath. So if we look underneath and go back to here, go back to here, let's look at this one in particular. All right, so again, these are your airflow sections. So this is a valve. So here, this opens straight down and then your air can flow in and around the valve into the chamber. Then when this is going to happen when your piston is in the down position as it's going down, then as the piston comes back up to compress that air, before to make the compression happens, this has to close, right? So that closes, so it's airtight seal in there. The piston comes up the top, boom, the spark hits, pushes the piston down, and then the next time the piston comes up, the exhaust valve opens up so that all the exhaust gas can come up and escape outside of the cylinder head and the cylinder. That is your standard 4-stroke engine. We have 4 of these in the bug. So what we measure with compression is we put a little gauge here to measure how much air is being compressed when these valves are both in the closed position. And we do need to adjust the valves to make sure they're not stuck partially open before we do this test. So it's kind of a 2-part thing. The valves have to be adjusted when the engine is cold, and then you measure the compression once the engine is warm. So let's go ahead and do that now. First, you want to rotate the engine to get it at top dead center, meaning the piston is at the very top of the cylinder. That's what that little notch indicates. And next, popping off the distributor cap, just want to make sure we're pointing at cylinder number 1. So you see that little orange thingy there that's pointing towards a little notch in the distributor. And putting the cap back on, you'll see that the wire that goes to cylinder number 1 And let's come around to the side of the engine. This is cylinder number 1 and number 2. So number 1 being on the right, number 2 being on the left. So what you're going to see here behind this valve cover, this covers the valves. So here we're going to be dealing with the other end of the valve, the pointy end. And these are the rocker arms. These are responsible for pushing the valve open and closed. Now you see there's a little space right now, so that means the springs are fully closing the valves. So what we're doing here, we want to measure the gap to be 0.06, and you'll see I could slip in the 0.06. The 0.08 is not quite going in. It's close, but not quite. So that means it's between 0.6, 0.7, but not 0.8. So you need this little gap here, because if there's not a gap, that means you're going to have an air leak back in the cylinder head area where the compression is. So number 1 checked out okay. Now we're going to rotate the engine backwards, half a rotation here. You see the little white mark there on the pulley. So that's lining up for cylinder number 2. So there's our 0.006 and checking the gap here. So it's just fitting in. So that is the intake. That's where the gas comes in, the valve for the gas coming in. And this is the exhaust side. So this is the checking the gap here. It's also 0.06. And it's a pretty snug fit, so I'm pretty confident it's a good value. So popping the valve cover back on. If needed, use a screwdriver. You just kind of lift it back in. And cylinders 1 and 2 are good. So now we're going to rotate the engine again. So the cylinder number 3 is at top dead center. So we've got to give it a little boost here. The belt's a little slippy, it seems. So I could put a wrench down on the bigger pulley, but I don't have a 30 millimeter offhand, so I got to go get one. So lining up the mark there for top dead center. Now we can go around and do cylinders 3 and 4. So taking off the valve cover. Sometimes it gets a little sticky. There's a cork gasket that holds it to keep the oil from coming out, but sometimes you got to give it a little boost to get it off there. So on the left side here is cylinder 3, and cylinder 4 is on the right. So looking closer at the cylinder 3 valves, let's grab the 0.06. We just double check and make sure there's a gap, which there should be. And got the 0.06. It's just slipping in there on both the exhaust and the intake. So just double checking here. And finally, let's move around to get ready for number 4. We have to advance the engine so that it is top dead center for cylinder number 4. Let's give it a little bit of a creak here. And line up the mark on the side of the case. Now back to cylinder number 4. Just wanted to feel it. I like to hear that click. And there's 6. Again, it's just snug. It's not, I wouldn't say it's loose. It's just barely slipping in. I mean, we could try a 7, but I don't have a 7. But the 8 definitely doesn't go in. And you can feel it. That's why they're called feeler gauges. So what if you do need to make an adjustment? So let's get a little closer here to see. I'm just doing this to show you what you would do. So basically, it's just a screw that is screwed in and held in place with that nut there. So when you back the nut off, then you can take a screwdriver and you can back out that screw if you need more of a gap. So watch the other side and see. It looks like it's getting closer, but you're just getting yourself some space. So I'll rock it in a second here. Now that's a big distance. That's probably like 40, 50 there, if not more. So I'm backing it way off. And if I went all the way in and kept pushing, it would start pushing the valve on the inside of the compression area, which would not be good at all. That's where you get leaks. So here, I'm just snugging it against the 6. I'm going to give it a little tug, and I'm just kind of hand adjusting until I can feel it to be smooth again. So, you know, let's just kind of hand feeling it. Once you get it to where you want it, what you got to be careful is that the screw does not change its position. So if you put the screwdriver in the middle of a wrench and then you turn the wrench, and try not to hit the camera, and right there you'll see I kind of bumped the screwdriver, which actually threw off my gap setting. You'll see in a minute that it's a little off. So the goal would be, ideally, you hold the screwdriver in place and don't move it the whole time. So here, trying to get the 6 in there, it's like, oops, a little too tight, so just can't get it in there. So really the only solution here. Now you might say, well, 0.6, 0.4, 0.002, you know, it's a gap is a gap, right? When the engine heats up, the rods that are driving this whole setup here can expand, so you actually end up with no gap. So the 0.006 is so that when things heat up, it gets almost to 0. So you do want that 0.06. So checking with 0.08, it's not going to go. So that means we're pretty close to 0.06. All right, and that's the 0.08. Won't fit. So that's how you would adjust it if you need to. Everything looks good on all 4 cylinders. So let's go ahead and pop this back on, and we can move on to the next step. So you got to heat the engine up to get it to operating temperature when you're going to do a compression test, because you just got to make sure everything's warm and heated and expanded, and that the rings are expanded and everything's at its normal temperature to make an accurate test. So first step is to pull out the spark plugs. So the spark plugs are barely poking into that area where the 2 valves are as well, into that chamber, because that's how it sparks and explodes the gas. I didn't have it in my little 3D drawing there, but imagine between the 2 valves there's a little hole, and that's where the spark plug goes. Actually, here, let me get you a picture. Wow. A little hot, but also a little rusty. I think I need some new ones. Also a little on the rusty side. Let's check the other side. So this is the EverTouch compression tester gauge set 67062, which I was able to borrow from O'Reilly Auto Parts. They just give you 48 hours to use it. You give them a deposit, and if you don't bring it back, you keep it. I don't really need to keep one, at least at the moment. Eventually I'll buy my own, but I'm not sure yet which is best for a bug. So it comes with a gauge, this hose, and then the adapter here, which screws in where the spark plug goes.
then you put that on that, sorry, this on that, that in there, and then you can measure the compression.
Another thing I was reading you want to make sure you do for accurate tests is hold your throttle wide open so that the airflow can go straight down the carburetor throat there and doesn't affect your compression test negatively. So I just use these little tie wrap things to kind of hold the choke flap open here and also the throttle lever below. So here's our gauge that we're going to measure in pounds per square inch. And just got to thread this into the spark plug hole. And once it gets threaded in, you just turn the engine over. Definitely don't want it running. You just want to be able to crank the engine to have it make some compression in the cylinder. So that's cylinder number 1. $110. $110. I love pushing that little button. So cylinder 1 is 110. And now over to cylinder 2. $115. $115. So that's the sound of a failing starter. Bought it off Amazon, should have got a Bosch. Pulled one out of the 68 bug. Just about 109, 110. That one's pushing a little over 115. But overall, within 5, 6, 7 of each other, it's pretty good. Then we can put the plugs back in. And calibrated torque of snug. Snug is good enough. Definitely don't want to strip it. And number 3 wire is this one. And number 4 wire. Pop to the other side. Just want to start it finger tight first, make sure it's threading in properly. You can definitely feel it better with your finger than with a tool. There we go. Number 1 and number 2. And let's start it and make sure it still runs fine. Let the full gas off and flip the old switch to run and I think we're in pretty good shape with this engine here. The result being around 110 plus minus 5 all the way around is considered pretty good. So we're gonna probably tear off some of the top of it to be able to, you know, make it look a little better and repaint maybe the heater boxes and, you know, just make it look good. But I don't think we need to tear into the engine and do any kind of rebuild at this point, which is good because I got another car I got to work on. So let's just work on getting this one done so I can get it out of the way so we can eventually get that one rolling. And now rounding out this video is the engine stand incident. So about this engine mount, it's got 3 legs. Hopefully it's stable enough, and it's got a couple arms here that affix to the side of the engine. So we're going to be mounting those 2 arms onto that hole with a screw, and then that stud down there. And then that way we can use the other 2 mounting holes over here for the Zalex starting kit. So first we're going to go ahead and pop off this removable arm. I'm going to loosen this a little bit. Take that off. Come down here and you can see this is going to go on there, on the bottom section there. This slips over the stud, and then the top one we have to grab our a nut and bolt to, and a couple washers to fix that on there. So let me set up the camera and we'll go ahead and do that next. So the bottom stud here gets a little tricky. You can see as it slides on, that part's fine, but we got a really close clearance between the flywheel and the stud. So what I got to do is find a way to add a spacer there so that we can put the stud on. You see I can't even screw a stud all the way down because there's no threads down here. The threads start right here. So what I had to do is actually go to Home Depot, buy a socket, cut it down so that it fits on here smoothly. This is just a 7/16. Using my favorite handy tool, the Dremel. So now that we cut off the socket, we have a nice through hole. Yo, it's still hot. Nice and toasty. I'll put it on quickly. There we go. So there it is on the stud. So now we can put on the washer. It has just enough space to clear. And we can also now put on the bolt there. Leave it a little bit loose until we get the other one on. And then in the top hole here, slip that in with a washer and a nut. Won't quite get on there, just enough. And now to tighten the bottom. All right, seems to be on there pretty good. I guess we'll know better once we get it on the stand and try to turn it over. So my plan is to use the engine hoist just to lift this right up. Just grabbing here on the engine stand, pull it upward. It was getting a little tilted, so I'd use the jack to lift it on one side and pull it up with the hoist on the other side. Just keep working it back and forth, I thought, until it got all the way up. That was the plan. I didn't really consider center of gravity though. Well, it's up. Stay. Stay. Oh, that's gas. I hope that set screw on the stand holds up. Well. Oh. How's oil going out? Interesting. Not part of the plan. My brilliant idea may not quite be working. Wonder if we should just put this down and start over. Although I think we're close. Oh, I should have taken the oil out. Well, I guess I am taking the oil out. Kind of wasn't thinking this through. Let's see, maybe if I get it higher. Kind of all in now. And the idea is to be able to swing this over and have it stay up. Huh. I don't know if this idea is working. All right. Well, let's see if we turn it. I just don't want it to drop on me or something. All right. Fail. Can at least put an oil pan under it. I think this is a two-person job. Need a little more slack on this thing. It's just not working, is it? I think I need a better way to wrap around the engine. So I probably need to let it down, take some of the stuff off, and then try again. How do people do this by themselves? Let's try one more time with a little more height. Since we've made this much of a mess, why not go all the way? Well, probably because it won't get any better, but let's try again.
Well, on the positive side, I get to use a new tool of sorts. I had never used this floor dry before. I'd never had an oil spill such as this before. So
This product allows you to spread it all over the oil and give it some time to absorb. And then I actually gave it a couple days and used a broom and swept it all up, and it did a pretty good job. Definitely better than trying to get a bunch of paper towels all over it. And yeah, always something new to learn and always a new tool to use, which, you know, which is good. I'm fine with that. It was great. Good times. All right, that's it for today. See ya.